You have been told that the Vikings came to America, raided, and left. You have been told they crossed the Atlantic 5 centuries before Columbus. You have been told that what they left behind on this continent was nothing. No settlements, no churches, no descendants, no story. The first two things are true. The third one is a lie that 4 women, born 300 years ago in the south of Iceland, are still carrying in their cells today. For more than 50 years, the standard textbook answer went something like this. Some Norse expeditions reached Newfoundland around the year 1000. They built a camp. They cut wood. They fought the people who were already there. They went home. The whole episode lasted, at most, a couple of decades, and left no farms, no graveyards, no children we could trace. A footnote. Then, in 2022, a team in the Netherlands proved that footnote happened on an exact date. Not a century, not a range, a year. 1021. And in 2020, a separate team in Copenhagen finished sequencing the genomes of 442 ancient Vikings pulled from the ground from Sicily to Greenland. What those bones say about who was actually under the Viking flag is the part the textbooks still do not know how to fit. To understand what should not exist, we have to walk into a meadow nobody had touched in 900 years. We have to read the rings of 3 trees that were alive at the moment a star punched a hole in our atmosphere. And we have to find a single line of Icelandic women alive today whose ancestress, somewhere in the silence, was almost certainly not given a choice. The story begins in a meadow nobody had walked through in 900 years. In 1960, a Norwegian explorer named Helge Ingstad was walking the northern tip of Newfoundland when he stopped in a small low meadow at a place called Lands or Meadows. The grass grew strangely in patches. The ground sat in odd shapes. Underneath was the reason. 8 buildings, a forge, iron nails, and butternut shells from trees that do not grow within 1,000 miles of that coast. The buildings were Norse. The radiocarbon dates pointed to around the year 1000. UNESCO eventually recognized the meadow as the first confirmed pre-Columbian European settlement in the Americas. But the meadow itself was tiny. 3 large halls, 5 workshops, an estimated 90 people at the upper bound. No cemetery, no church, no evidence of children born there in any meaningful number. It was not a colony. It was a door someone opened, walked through twice, and then closed forever. For 60 years after that, the question that haunted the field was when, exactly, the door had been open. More than 150 separate radiocarbon dates had been attempted. The calibrated ranges spread across 2.5 centuries. The site was real. The chronology was a fog. And then, in 2022, the fog burned off in a single paper. The trick was the sun. In the year 993 of the Common Era, the Earth was struck by a massive solar particle event. A surge of cosmic radiation hit the upper atmosphere and pushed the production of carbon-14 up by 9 parts per thousand. In a normal year, that number drifts by less than 2. Every tree alive on the planet that summer recorded the spike in its growth rate, a signature you can read with a microscope, written into the wood by a star on a date we know to the year. Margot Quitums and her team at the University of Groningen took 3 pieces of wood from Lands or Meadows, pieces that had been cut by Norse iron tools. Clean, low-angle cuts the local indigenous people did not yet make. 2 of the pieces were fir, almost certainly North American balsam fir. The third was juniper or thuja. All 3 preserved the 993 signal in their rings. The bark layer, the outermost ring just under the skin of the tree, was still attached on all 3 samples. That meant you could count. The team counted 29 rings outward from the spike to the bark, on every sample. 29. On all 3 trees, cut from 3 different stems by 3 different blades. The felling year was 1021 of the Common Era. The juniper had been cut in the spring. One of the firs had been cut in the summer or early autumn of the same year. Stop and picture it. A man steps into a tree line on the coast of Newfoundland in the spring of 1021. He swings an iron blade into a juniper trunk. His brother walks the same shore 3 or 4 months later and brings down a fir. Both pieces of wood are dropped, used, abandoned, buried, and lie under the grass for the next 1004 years. Until a team on a different continent reads the chemistry of a star into the rings and dates the swing of the blade to the season it landed. That is what an undeniable date looks like. It is also where the easy part of this story ends. The date settled when. It did not settle who. Because the genomes from Copenhagen, 442 of them, said something nobody had been ready to hear. 2 men buried in full Viking warrior gear in the islands of Orkney off the coast of Scotland turned out to be genetically Pictish. Irish and Scottish, native to the British Isles. The first published Pictish genomes in history were buried under Viking grave goods. In several cemeteries in southern Denmark and on the islands of Sweden, men buried as Vikings carried more than half their ancestry from the Mediterranean. Southern European. The descendants, in some cases, of Roman colonists who had drifted north a few centuries earlier. In the north of Norway, 2 more Viking burials carried Sami ancestry. Indigenous Arctic, not Scandinavian. And at an execution site in Dorset in England, a defeated raiding party of 40-odd men turned out to be a mix. Danish-like ancestry next to Norwegian-like ancestry next to British-like ancestry, dying together on a Saxon hillside. If you are picturing the Viking flag in your head right now, picture this instead. A boat in which the rower in front of you was Picto-Irish. The rower behind you was the descendant of a Sicilian colonist. The man at the rudder was Sami. And the boy bailing water was, statistically, more Danish than Norwegian, even though the boat had launched out of a Norwegian fjord. That is what 442 bodies look like when you finally read them. Viking was a job. It was a culture. It was a fashion of dying. It was never a bloodline. Which makes the next discovery the one nobody expected. If a Viking crew that landed in Newfoundland in the spring of 1021 was a coalition of Picto-Irish, Southern European, Sami, and Norse, then the encounter that followed should have left a trace. A child, a captive, a mitochondrial line, something on one side or the other that the sagas record and that the bones could confirm. The Copenhagen team checked. They sequenced every Norse skeleton they could pull out of the ground in Greenland, the colony that served as the launch pad for every voyage west, the community that lived next door to the Thule Inuit for 250 years. What the genomes show is nothing. Not one detectable strand of Native American ancestry in the Norse Greenlanders. Not one Inuit segment. 2 populations, in walking distance, for a quarter of a millennium, exchanged biologically almost nothing. If the Norse refused to mix with the people they shared an island with for 250 years, the probability that they mixed with anyone during a handful of brief visits to a continent they barely held collapses to almost zero. The contact at Lens or Meadows was real. The date is now exact to the year. The biology refused to take part. And that is the thing that should not exist. Because somewhere on the other side of the Atlantic, the molecules say otherwise. In 2011, an Icelandic geneticist named Sigridur Sun Ebenesersdottir, working with the team at Decad Genetics in Reykjavik, published a paper that almost did not get past peer review. Among modern Icelanders, she had identified a tiny lineage. 80 people, all of them, ultimately, descended through their mothers and their mothers' mothers from the same hidden ancestress. The line is called C1e. The C1 family of mitochondrial lineages is found almost exclusively in Native American populations. Across the entire continent of Europe, C1e has been documented in one place and one place only. These 80 Icelanders. Iceland keeps the most complete genealogical record of any country on Earth. The database is called the Icelandingabók. It traces every modern Icelander back, marriage by marriage, baptism by baptism, to the medieval settlement of the island. When the Decode team traced the 80 Icelandic carriers backward, the lines converged on 4 women. 4 women, born in the early 1700s, in 2 small districts on the southern coast of Iceland, Skaftafell County, Rangárvalla County. Beyond them, the records run out. The team weighed 3 possibilities, in order. 1. The lineage was European all along, and we had simply never identified C1e anywhere on the continent until then. Every subsequent study of European mitochondrial DNA, including the 442 ancient Viking genomes sequenced years later, has weakened this option further. It is still not seen anywhere in Europe outside this single Icelandic line. 2. The line entered Iceland through trade contact in the early 1700s, possibly on a Danish ship returning from the Caribbean. Iceland in those years was an isolated, devastated island recovering from famine. There is no record of any indigenous American woman arriving there in that period. The genealogical convergence on 4 women born before significant Caribbean traffic would have made such an arrival logistically unlikely. 3. The line arrived in Iceland much earlier, on a Norse ship returning from a Vinland expedition, in the body of a woman who had not been asked. This is the option the data favors, even today. The authors of the original paper are careful. They flag, openly, that mitochondrial DNA does not carry a date stamp. It carries a geography. And the geography it carries is the side of the Atlantic the Norse were sailing to. The genome scale works since then. The 442 Viking bodies, the Norse Greenlanders, all the other matrilineal lines on the planet, has not found C1e anywhere else. It is one line, carried by 80 people. Whose mother's mother's mothers walk a chain that bends backward through the 1700s, through the medieval cold, through the silence of the Greenland colony, into the cargo hold of a Norse ship coming east in the autumn of some year nobody recorded. We do not know her name. We do not know her age. We do not know whether she fought, or whether she was traded, or whether she survived the crossing and had children somebody loved, or whether the rest of her life was a long, silent argument with grief. What we have is one of the smallest genetic objects the human body produces. A circle of DNA inside the energy factories of every cell. A line that copies forward through the women only. 4 letters. A number, C1e. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But it is more than the men who wrote the sagas were willing to give her. They let her disappear from the record. The molecules in her great-great-granddaughters did not. And the colony that brought her east did not survive much longer. The Norse Greenlanders, the people who had launched every voyage to the Americas, did not flee their island. They did not retreat to Iceland. They were not slaughtered by the Inuit. They simply ran out. Bone isotope work by a Danish team in 1999 showed that the Norse Greenlanders ate 20% marine food at the founding of their colony around the year 985. By the 1400s, they were eating 80% marine food. They were eating, by the end, like the Inuit they had refused to mix with. The last documented event in the colony is a wedding at the church at Havelsey in the year 1408. After that wedding, the written record goes quiet. The skeletons get younger, the graves get shallower, the crops disappear from the pollen record, and by some time in the middle of the 1400s, there was nobody left to bury anyone. If you have ever held a small souvenir from a museum gift shop, or seen a children's book about Norse explorers, or watched a halftime advert during an American football game in October, ask yourself, Honestly, what face you saw? Almost certainly a blonde man. Almost certainly a horned helmet, even though no Viking ever wore one. Almost certainly a single, ethnically pure, blue-eyed, axe-swinging Scandinavian. That face is a costume the 19th century painted on top of the bones. The bones say something else. The Viking who reached America in 1021 was not who the textbook drew. He was a Picto-Irishman, or a Sicilian descendant, or a Sami archer working under a culture's flag, not a bloodline's. He left no farm. He left no village. He left no descendant on the continent he had reached. What he left behind in his own ship, sailing east, was one captive whose name nobody bothered to write down. She is still walking around. She is walking around in 80 Icelandic women alive today, who have no idea that the line inside their cells came from the other side of an ocean their textbook said was discovered 400 years after she had already crossed it. You have been told that the Vikings came to America, raided, and left. The first part was true. The last part, what they left and what they took with them, was a story the molecules in 4 women's daughters kept for 1,000 years before someone finally read them. If you want to keep following this, what ancient DNA is doing to the empires the history books taught us to celebrate, subscribe. The people who watch these all the way through are the people who already suspected the textbook left something out. Turn the bell on if you do not want to wait to find out what the next body is going to say. Every week there is another piece of the record that turns out to be more complicated and more interesting than the version we were taught. The next genome is already on your screen. Open it.